The autumn sky hung low over the kingdom, a mix of blood orange and violet clouds swirling above the ancient stone towers. Leaves rattled against the walls, as if whispering secrets of the past. In the capital's grand hall, banners of deep crimson and gold swayed in the cold wind that slipped through the open windows. Today was the bonding ritual, a ceremony that would decide the mates of powerful alphas for the coming year. The room shimmered with torchlight, reflecting off polished floors and gilded walls, but not all who entered felt warmth. Elara, the girl no one remembered, stepped cautiously through the towering doors. Her hands clutched the folds of her gray cloak, fingers trembling despite her effort to stay calm. She was the Forgotten Omega, a title whispered with fear and suspicion. Some said she brought misfortune. Others said her birth was cursed. Elara herself had grown up hearing nothing but cold words and silent glances. Her parents, proud of their other children, had never acknowledged her presence. Even her reflection seemed faint and shadowed, as if the world itself tried to forget her. The hall was alive with the sounds of preparation. Alphas strutted in polished armor, their capes flowing, their eyes sharp and commanding. Betas whispered among themselves, calculating alliances and noting weaknesses. Omegas, delicate and proud, glided toward the center of the hall, hoping to attract a mate before the ritual ended. Laughter and whispers filled the air, but Elara felt none of it. She was invisible, a ghost in her own life. As she approached the ceremonial circle, she noticed the other Omegas. They were beautiful, their hair braided with gold threads, eyes shining with anticipation. Some had been trained all their lives for this moment. Some had families eager to see them bonded with power. And then there was Elara, standing quietly at the edge, unnoticed and unwanted. The elders began the ritual. "Let the Omegas present themselves," the High Elder commanded, his voice echoing like a drum through the hall. One by one, the chosen Omegas stepped forward. Alphas circled them, testing their presence, reading the subtleties of their aura. Elara watched, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew this would not go well. She had tried to hide herself all her life, hoping the world would not notice her mistakes, her silence, her shadows. The first few alphas chose quickly, drawn to the radiant energy of their targets. Murmurs of approval filled the hall. Then came the awkward silences. One by one, Omegas approached her, and one by one, the alphas turned away. Some whispered excuses to each other, some laughed quietly, and some merely shook their heads. The words were not loud, but they stung more sharply than a blade. Elara's chest tightened. She lowered her gaze, feeling the heat of shame rising to her cheeks. She had expected this. She had known the world would reject her. But she had not expected it to feel so empty, so hollow. The High Elder frowned. "The Forgotten Omega," he said softly, almost pityingly. "Step forward." Every eye in the hall turned to her. The silence was complete. No alpha stepped toward her. No hand reached for her. No one moved. It was as if she were a shadow, passing through life unnoticed, unclaimed. Her knees felt weak, but she forced herself to take a step forward. Then the doors at the far end of the hall opened. A cold gust of wind swept inside, scattering loose papers and lifting the banners high. Heads turned, whispering, as one figure entered, cloaked in shadows, yet radiating a presence that made the entire hall still. The Alpha King appeared. His boots echoed on the stone floors as he walked toward the circle. Eyes locked onto Elara. Kalen. The name alone carried power. He was a king unmatched in strength, feared across the kingdom for his ruthlessness and wisdom. Many alphas had tried to challenge him. None had succeeded. Rumors said he had taken mates before, but only the ones worthy, the ones he could see through, the ones who could survive the storm of his power. The whispers faded as he approached. He did not speak. He did not look at the other Omegas. His eyes were fixed on Alara. She felt her breath catch. A strange heat filled her chest, a mixture of fear, awe, and something she could not name. It was magnetic, pulling her forward even as her body wanted to shrink into the shadows. The High Elder cleared his throat, uncertain. "Your Majesty," he began, but Kaelin raised a hand. Silence fell. Even the alphas who had chosen their mates before froze, watching. Then Kaelin stepped forward and, with a voice low and commanding, said a single sentence, "I claim her." A gasp swept through the hall. Alphas blinked in disbelief. Betas murmured, struggling to hide their surprise. Even some of the Elder Council shook their heads. Alara felt her heart leap, then falter. Did he truly mean her? The girl no one wanted? Kaelin's gaze softened, though only slightly. He reached out, not touching, but directing the attention of the hall, and spoke again. "She will be my mate. Let all others know. This is not open for debate." For the first time in her life, Alara felt seen. Every fear, every loneliness, every shadowed thought she had carried seemed to quiver in the light of his attention. And yet, fear mingled with awe. The weight of being chosen by such a powerful king pressed against her chest. She was not ready. How could she be ready? The crowd did not move. Some looked angry, some jealous, some frightened. No one had expected the king to claim a forgotten Omega. Murmurs spread like fire through dry leaves. Why her? Why her? One alpha whispered. "She is weak," another said. "This will bring ruin," muttered a third. Alara lowered her gaze, feeling heat in her ears. She wanted to speak, to explain herself, but no words came. Her voice felt like a fragile thread in the storm of Kaelin's presence, and yet she did not retreat. She could not. Something inside her stirred, a pulse of power, of connection, of destiny. Kaelin's eyes held hers. In that moment, the chaos around them faded. The whispers, the laughter, the doubt, they became distant echoes. All that existed was the circle, the ritual, and the girl who had been invisible her whole life. A sudden thought struck her. Perhaps being forgotten had been her gift, not her curse. Perhaps the world had overlooked her for this very moment. Perhaps she was meant to be here, at the center of power, not as a pawn, but as a force to be reckoned with. The High Elder finally spoke, voice trembling with awe. The hall erupted with murmurs, whispers, and quiet protests. Some bowed, some clenched fists, some simply stared in shock. But Alara did not move. She could feel the king's gaze like a tether, strong and steady, pulling her forward into a future she had never imagined. Her pulse raced, but amidst the fear, there was an unfamiliar thrill. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer forgotten. She had been claimed, and with that claim came a new world, one filled with danger, mystery, and perhaps even love. As the ceremony ended and the other Omegas were guided to their chosen alphas, Alara remained in the circle, trembling yet firm. Kaelin stood beside her, silent, commanding. Yet, something softer flickered in his expression, something she could not yet name. And then, just as she began to wonder what the future held, Kaelin leaned slightly closer, enough for only her to hear. His voice was a whisper, yet it carried the weight of a storm. "Do not be afraid, forgotten one. Your life is about to begin." Alara swallowed hard, feeling a mixture of dread and wonder. She had survived the years of being unseen, unheard, and unwanted. But nothing had prepared her for this being chosen by the king himself. A life of shadows had ended. A life of fire and storms was about to begin. And in that moment, as the torches flickered and the wind howled through the hall, Elara realized that her story was only just beginning. The wind howled through the fortress walls, carrying the scent of rain and wet stone. Lightning streaked across the dark sky, illuminating the jagged cliffs that held the Alpha King's fortress like a crown of shadows. Inside, torches flickered against the cold gray walls, casting long, wavering shapes. The hallways smelled of iron, old stone, and faint incense. An air of power and history that pressed against every step Elara took. She walked beside Kaelin, the Alpha King, her steps hesitant. The title still felt strange on her tongue, King's Mate. The words carried weight she could hardly bear. She was the girl no one wanted, the one shunned and whispered about. And yet here she was, walking in the company of the most feared ruler in the kingdom. The fortress was unlike anything she had imagined. Great halls stretched like rivers of stone, with ceilings so high they disappeared into shadow. Windows were rare, but each looked out onto the jagged cliffs and stormy sea below, a reminder that this place existed apart from the ordinary world. Servants moved silently, their heads bowed, not daring to meet her eyes. Even they seemed to sense Kaelin's command, his presence alone bending the room to his will. "You walk as if the stones will swallow you," Kaelin said, his voice low and even, carrying a hint of dry amusement. "Do you not trust your own feet?" Elara swallowed. I am not used to this place," she admitted, keeping her gaze downward. Her fingers clenched the folds of her cloak. Every instinct urged her to hide, to vanish into the shadows where she had always felt safe. Kaelin's gaze softened slightly, though the sharp edge of authority remained. "You are not meant to hide," he said. "You have been forgotten. Yes, but not by me." The words sent a shiver through her. No one had ever said anything like that before. Not her parents, not her teachers, not even the few who had smiled at her, faintly, and then turned away. To hear it now, from the king himself, stirred something deep inside, a mixture of fear, wonder, and hope she had never dared to name. They reached a large chamber at the center of the fortress. A fireplace roared along one wall, flames casting golden light across polished floors and tapestries that depicted battles, rituals, and kings long gone. Kaelin gestured for her to sit. "You will stay here for the night," he said. "Tomorrow, your training begins. There is much you must learn." Elara nodded, her throat dry. She wanted to speak, to ask questions, but the words refused to come. Instead, she let her eyes wander across the room, taking in the opulence and history. Everything here seemed alive with power. Every stone, every tapestry, every flicker of flame. And yet, beneath it all, she sensed loneliness. The same loneliness she had felt her entire life. Kaelin watched her quietly, his expression unreadable. "Do not mistake this for comfort," he said finally. "This fortress is a place of power. It is not meant to soothe the weak. It is meant to sharpen the strong. You are about to step into a world that will test you in ways you cannot yet imagine." Elara nodded again, her heart hammering. She was used to being tested in small ways, snide whispers, unkind stares, cold dinners, but nothing like this. She felt as if she were standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down into a stormy sea, unsure if she would fall or fly. Kaelin seemed to sense her thoughts. "You are not weak," he said. "You may feel forgotten, but you have a strength most cannot see. I see it, and that is why you are here. That is why I claimed you." The words struck her like thunder. She wanted to believe them, wanted to feel the truth in them, but old doubts clung stubbornly. She had been invisible her whole life. Could she truly be strong? Could she survive the scrutiny, the danger, and the power she had stepped into? The night stretched long. Kaelin gave her little sleep, not out of cruelty, but because the fortress demanded preparation. He spoke of the kingdom, its laws, and its enemies. He showed her maps of lands beyond the mountains, lands she had never even imagined. And through it all, he watched her. Not with suspicion, but with quiet interest, as if measuring her spirit. Ilara discovered that Kalen was not just a king in title. He was a man shaped by centuries of battles, both in the field and within his own soul. His eyes held pain, loss, and loneliness, a weight that even his power could not hide. She felt her chest tighten, sensing emotions he did not speak aloud. A strange connection stirred within her, as if she could reach into his heart and touch the parts no one else had seen. It frightened her. She had never felt such intimacy before. Even in her quietest moments at home, she had never known such intensity. Yet, it also drew her forward. Fear and fascination intertwined, creating a tension she could neither name nor resist. The following morning, the lessons began. Kalen tested her in ways that seemed strange at first. He asked her to identify the hidden weaknesses in the fortress, to notice the tiniest details in the rituals of court, to sense the emotions of those around her. At first, she failed. Her powers, subtle and uncontrolled, revealed little. The other Omegas would have laughed at her struggles, but she found herself alone with the king, under his critical gaze, and that alone was terrifying. "You hesitate too much," Kalen said. "Strength is not just in your hands or your body. It is in your mind, your heart, your courage. Do not fear the shadows. Step into them." Ilara bit her lip, trying to hold back tears of frustration. She wanted to be strong. She wanted to prove herself. She wanted, more than anything, to be more than the forgotten girl everyone had ignored. And yet, every step felt uncertain. Every move felt clumsy. Every thought seemed small, compared to the storm of Kalen's presence. But then, in a quiet moment, she felt it, a flicker of something deep within. A pulse of power she had never fully understood. A connection to the king that went beyond words. When she focused, she could sense his mood, his tension, his fear beneath the armor of command. It was faint, but undeniable. She had never reached this far into another's heart before. Kalen noticed the change immediately. His eyes softened, though only for a moment. "You feel more than most," he said quietly. "You sense the currents beneath the surface. Few can do that. Fewer can survive it." Ilara's pulse quickened. Could she survive? Could she truly stand beside him in this storm of power, politics, and danger? She did not know. But for the first time, she did not shrink away. She felt a flicker of courage, small but bright, within her chest. The day passed in a blur of training, observation, and whispered lessons. By evening, Ilara's mind ached, her body trembled, and yet, she felt a strange exhilaration. She had survived. She had seen the depths of Kalen's power and had not crumbled. She had sensed the loneliness beneath his mask and had not turned away. And in some quiet corner of her heart, she wondered what it would mean if she could truly reach him, truly understand him, truly be seen. As night fell, Kalen called her to the balcony. The storm had passed, leaving the world wet and glistening. Moonlight reflected on the wet stone, casting silver patterns across the walls. The sea roared below, echoing the turbulence within Ilara's chest. "Do you understand why I claimed you?" Kalen asked, his voice low, carrying across the balcony. Ilara nodded, unsure of her words. I think I do," she whispered. Kalen's eyes held hers, sharp and penetrating. "This is not about beauty or obedience. It is about strength, courage, and the fire in your soul. You are the one I chose because you are forgotten, yet unbroken. You are the one who can walk in shadow and light alike. And perhaps, help me face what I cannot face alone." Ilara felt a rush of warmth and fear, awe and longing. She had never known such responsibility, such trust. And yet, she could not deny the truth in his words. For the first time, she felt she belonged somewhere. She felt seen. But even as the moonlight wrapped around them, a chill lingered. Outside the fortress walls, the kingdom was restless. Rivals whispered. Allies plotted. And in the shadows, unseen hands moved, watching the king and his newly claimed mate, waiting for a moment to strike. Elara's heart beat faster. She had stepped into a world of power, danger, and intrigue. She had been chosen, but the choice had placed her in a storm she could not yet see. And still, despite the fear, she felt a spark of determination. "I will do my best," she said softly, meeting Kaelin's gaze. He nodded, a shadow of a smile touching his lips. "See that you do. For your life. For mine. For what we are becoming." And in that moment, as the wind whispered against the cliffs, and the fortress stood silent but watchful, Elara realized the truth. She was no longer forgotten. She had been chosen by the king, and whatever awaited her in the days to come, she would face it not as the invisible girl of the past, but as the Omega he had claimed. The storm had passed, but the air remained heavy with tension. The fortress of the Alpha King, Kaelin, seemed to breathe like a living being, its stone walls echoing the whispers of the past. Elara walked through the corridors, her cloak brushing the cold floors. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the shadows of the past were pressing close to her. She had survived the first days of training, survived the king's quiet scrutiny, and even felt a spark of power awakening within her. Yet, she knew the true tests had only just begun. Kaelin met her in the central hall, his expression unreadable. His presence filled the room like a shadow that stretched and bent around her, commanding yet strangely protective. "We leave at dawn," he said. "There is a place you must see, one tied to my bloodline, to the curse that has haunted me for centuries." Elara's heart quickened. She had sensed darkness in him before, but now the weight of it pressed down with an almost tangible force. "A curse?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Kaelin nodded, his gaze distant. "It is a shadow that has touched every mate I have ever had. Every bond I have tried to form has ended in tragedy. Until now, I believed it could not be broken. Until now, I did not think the forgotten Omega would even exist." Elara swallowed hard. Her title, once a source of shame, now carried weight she could barely comprehend. She had been invisible her whole life, ignored and forgotten. And yet here she was, chosen to face a legacy of power, danger, and sorrow. The next morning, they set out toward the ruins of an ancient temple on the outskirts of the kingdom. The path was jagged and overgrown, the stones slick with recent rain. The wind whispered through twisted trees, carrying voices that seemed not entirely human. Elara followed Kaelin closely, sensing the power radiating from him, a storm contained behind his calm exterior. As they approached the temple, Elara noticed the carvings etched into the stones, symbols of protection, power, and binding. The air vibrated with magic, thick and almost suffocating. She realized that Kaelin's curse was not merely legend. It had roots in this very place, in rituals long forgotten by the world. Kaelin paused at the entrance, his hand resting on the carved stone. "This temple holds the remnants of my family's past," he said. "Here, the curse was formed. Here, it can be broken if one is strong enough, wise enough, and brave enough to face it." Elara looked up at him, her eyes wide. "And, you think I am that person?" Kaelin's gaze held hers, sharp and unwavering. "Because you are not afraid to be seen. You are not afraid to walk through shadows. You are the one who can face what others could not." A chill ran down her spine. The weight of his trust pressed against her chest. She had never felt anyone believe in her like this. Not her family, not her friends, not even herself. And yet, something in her stirred, a quiet flame of courage that she had never known. They entered the temple. The interior was dark, filled with broken statues and fallen pillars. Dust floated in the air, catching the light from Kalen's torch. Shadows danced across the walls, forming shapes that seemed alive. Ilara could feel her pulse quicken, not just from fear, but from the strange thrill of stepping into a place that had been forbidden, feared, and abandoned. Kalen led her to a circular chamber at the center of the temple. The floor was carved with intricate symbols, faded and cracked with age. In the center, a stone pedestal held a crystal that pulsed with faint, dark light. The energy from it made her skin tingle. "This is where the last mate fell," Kalen said quietly, his voice carrying sorrow and warning. "Every mate before you, who entered this place, could not withstand the curse. It consumed them. I was left alone, unbroken in body but shattered in spirit. If you are to survive this, you must be strong, not just in body, but in heart." Ilara stepped closer to the pedestal, her fingers hovering over the crystal. She could feel its power, a pull that whispered to her deepest fears and desires. It called to the part of her that had always felt unseen, forgotten, and unworthy. And yet, it also stirred something new, a strength, quiet and persistent, that she had never known she possessed. I don't know if I can," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Kalen placed a hand on her shoulder. "You can," he said. "I will not lie to you. It will not be easy, but I will be here. You are not alone, Ilara, and that is why the curse may finally be broken." She looked into his eyes, searching for the truth behind his words. There was no false hope there, only a deep, raw belief that she could rise to this challenge. She felt a shiver of fear, but also a spark of determination. She could not fail, not for herself, not for him, not for the destiny that had chosen her. The first test came swiftly. Shadows emerged from the walls, dark and writhing, taking shapes that whispered and hissed. They spoke in voices that sounded like memories, fears, and regrets all at once. Ilara could feel her heart racing, her mind struggling to separate reality from illusion. "Focus on me," Kalen commanded, his voice steady. "Do not let the shadows touch your mind." Ilara took a deep breath, centering herself. She reached inward, to the quiet strength she had cultivated over years of being forgotten, of surviving in silence. Slowly, the shadows began to hesitate, their forms flickering as she extended her awareness outward, sensing their weakness. "You are stronger than they believe," Kalen said, watching her with a mix of admiration and caution. "Do not underestimate yourself. Your power is tied to your heart. The moment you doubt yourself, the shadows will strike harder." Ilara nodded, her confidence growing with every moment. She could feel the pulse of her own power mingling with Kalen's presence, a connection neither of them fully understood but both could sense. The shadows, once threatening, began to retreat, dissolving into the air like smoke in sunlight. For the first time, she felt a taste of victory. But Kalen's gaze remained serious. "This is only the beginning," he said. "The true danger is not the shadows, but those who would manipulate them, who would use fear and doubt to control the kingdom, and us." Ilara felt a chill. She had survived the temple's illusions, but the real threat, she realized, lay beyond these walls. Rivals in the court, enemies in the kingdom, and powers older than she could imagine would test her every step. And yet, she no longer felt invisible. She was no longer forgotten. That night, as they camped within the temple, Kalen spoke softly beside the fire. "You have done well today. Few could face the shadows and emerge intact. But you did. You are learning not just to survive, but to fight, to see, to understand." Ilara stared into the flames, feeling the warmth and light seep into her bones. I think I can do this," she admitted. I think I can face it, whatever it is. Kaelin's eyes softened, though the shadow of past pain lingered. You are more than you know, he said, and I will help you discover it. But remember this. The world outside these walls will not be forgiving. Power invites envy, fear, and betrayal. You must be ready. Ilara nodded, understanding the weight of his words. The training, the connection, the awakening of her own power, none of it mattered if she could not survive the kingdom's intrigues. She realized that to stand beside the Alpha King, she would need not only courage but wisdom, patience, and the ability to see through lies and schemes. And then, as the fire flickered and the night deepened, a distant sound reached them, a rustle in the shadows, a whisper too deliberate to be the wind. Ilara's pulse quickened. The test was not over. The danger was closer than they had thought. Kaelin's hand rested lightly on hers, a grounding force amidst the tension. Stay close, he whispered. The shadows outside are not like those within. Be ready for what is coming. Ilara swallowed hard, feeling the thrill and fear mingling within her. She had faced illusions today, had begun to understand her strength, and had felt the connection to Kaelin deepen. But the night reminded her that the world beyond the temple would not wait. Shadows lingered, enemies watched, and her journey was far from over. And yet, as she met Kaelin's gaze, she felt a surge of determination. Forgotten she may have been, but she would not remain invisible. She would not be afraid. She would stand beside him, face the darkness, and claim her place not just as the king's mate, but as someone strong enough to shape her own destiny. Dawn broke over the kingdom, pale light spilling across the jagged cliffs and the fortress walls. Storms had passed, leaving the world washed and glimmering, but the air remained thick with tension. Ilara stood beside Kaelin on the terrace, the wind tugging at her cloak. She had grown stronger in the days since the temple, learning to sense the currents of power in the fortress, reading the hearts of those around her, and feeling her own strength awaken. Yet the kingdom beyond the walls remained dangerous. Whispers of rebellion, jealousy, and envy had reached even the farthest corners. Rivals plotted, allies hesitated, and old shadows stirred in secret. Ilara knew that their bond, strong as it was growing, would be tested more fiercely than anything she had faced before. Kaelin watched her closely, his eyes sharp yet full of something softer, something almost like pride. The time has come, he said, voice steady. You have learned much, but now you will face the forces that threaten not just us, but the kingdom itself. Are you ready? Ilara nodded, her heart steady despite the fear twisting in her stomach. I am ready, she said. I will stand with you. The king's fortress doors opened, revealing a courtyard where the first wave of danger waited. A rival faction, hidden in the shadows, had moved to strike. Armed not only with blades but with dark magic, they sought to take the throne and destroy Kaelin's rule. Ilara's pulse quickened, but she did not step back. She could feel the threads of power connecting her to Kaelin, a bond that pulsed between them stronger than the storm outside. Kaelin raised his hand, and the soldiers moved into position. Ilara followed, stepping beside him, her senses alert. She could feel the emotions of those around her, the fear, the determination, the anger, and she focused, letting her aura extend outward. The moment the first dark shadows attacked, she reached out with her energy, sensing their movements, predicting their strikes. It was terrifying and exhilarating. She moved as if guided by instinct, weaving between attacks, deflecting magical blasts with a force that surprised even her. Kaelin fought beside her, his sword a blur, his presence commanding, yet always mindful of her. He did not shield her entirely, but he did not let her fall. Together, they were a force neither the shadows nor the enemy had anticipated. The battle raged through the courtyard. Ilara felt her strength grow with every motion, her confidence building as she realized she could stand against the danger. The shadows, sensing her power, recoiled at her presence. For the first time, she felt the forgotten girl within her, replaced by someone new, someone unafraid, capable, and fierce. Kaelin glanced at her once, and in that look, Elara understood the depth of his trust. It was more than protection. It was belief. It was recognition that she was not just his mate, but his partner in this struggle. And that knowledge fueled her, letting her push forward, even when exhaustion threatened to overtake her. At last, the enemy faltered. Their magic faltered, their confidence broke, and one by one, they were driven back. Elara and Kaelin moved as one, their bond guiding them, their strength intertwined. When the final shadow dissolved, a hush fell over the courtyard. The soldiers, exhausted but alive, stared in awe. Elara's hands trembled, but her eyes shone with a quiet triumph. Kaelin approached her, his expression serious yet soft. "You have done well," he said. "You have faced what few could even see coming, and you stood without faltering. Do you understand now what I saw in you?" Elara met his gaze, her chest still heaving. I think I do," she whispered. "I am stronger than I believed, not alone, but with you." Kaelin nodded, a rare smile touching his lips. "And you are not forgotten. Not anymore. You are seen. You are recognized. You are remarkable." The words warmed her more than any fire. For the first time, she felt truly accepted not just as Kaelin's mate, but as someone who mattered, someone who could shape the world with her presence. Yet, even as victory settled over the courtyard, a shadow lingered. The curse of Kaelin's bloodline was not broken by battle alone. It required courage, trust, and a bond strong enough to defy the darkness itself. The crystal in the temple still pulsed faintly, reminding them both that the final step awaited. Kaelin took her hand, leading her back to the temple. "We face the last part together," he said. "This is the moment that will decide everything." Elara's heart pounded as they stepped into the chamber. The crystal glowed with a deeper light, resonating with the energy of the fortress, the kingdom, and their combined bond. She could feel it tugging at her, testing her resolve, probing her fears. Kaelin stood beside her, his hand steady on hers, his presence anchoring her. "Together," he said. "We face this together." Elara nodded, closing her eyes. She reached inward, focusing on the strength she had cultivated, the courage she had claimed, and the bond she shared with Kaelin. She extended her energy outward, letting it flow into the crystal, letting it mingle with the power of the bloodline and the magic that had once caused so much suffering. The crystal pulsed, brightening with each moment. Shadows writhed within its depths, the remnants of past failures, fear, and pain. But Elara did not falter. She held Kaelin's hand, letting their combined strength flow through her. She whispered his name, and in that simple act, a surge of energy exploded outward, shattering the darkness and filling the chamber with light. Kaelin's eyes shone with a mixture of awe and relief. "You did it," he whispered, his voice trembling. "We did it." Elara opened her eyes, seeing the crystal now calm, glowing softly with a pure light. The curse had been broken not by her alone, nor by Kaelin alone, but by their bond, forged in trust, courage, and love. A quiet settled over the temple, as if the stones themselves were breathing in relief. Elara sank to her knees, exhausted, yet filled with a sense of triumph she had never known. Kaelin knelt beside her, his hand on her cheek, his gaze gentle and unwavering. "You are extraordinary," he said, "not because of power alone, but because of your heart. You never gave up, even when the world had forgotten you. And that is why we stand here, victorious, together." Tears pricked at Elara's eyes. She had been invisible, ignored, and doubted her entire life. And yet, Here she was, standing beside the most powerful man in the kingdom, having faced shadows, danger, and fear, and having emerged not just alive, but triumphant. Kalen leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "You are mine, Elara. Not because I claimed you, but because I see you. Completely. And I will never let you be forgotten again." Elara felt her heart swell, the weight of years of loneliness and rejection lifting from her shoulders. She reached up, placing her hand over his, feeling the warmth, the strength, and the unspoken promise in his touch. Not as someone to protect, but as someone who stands beside you. One to mated, a potter. The storm outside had passed, leaving the kingdom washed and shining in the morning light. The fortress walls glimmered, and the sea beyond reflected the first rays of sunlight. The world felt new, full of possibilities and hope. Kalen and Elara rose together, stepping from the temple into the brightening day. Their bond, tested by shadow, fire, and fear, had been forged in darkness and strengthened in light. The kingdom watched as the Alpha King and his once-forgotten mate walked side by side, a symbol of power, courage, and destiny. And as they looked out over the lands that awaited them, Elara understood a truth she had never known. Being forgotten had not been a curse. It had been a preparation. She had been shaped in shadow to stand in the light. She had been chosen not just to survive, but to thrive. Kalen turned to her, a rare softness in his eyes. "This is only the beginning," he said. "But now, we face it together. As equals, as partners, as more than the world ever imagined." Elara smiled, the first true smile she had felt in years. And in that moment, the kingdom, the fortress, and the storms beyond seemed to hold their breath. A bond had been forged in darkness, tested by fear, and made unbreakable by trust, courage, and love. The forgotten Omega was no longer forgotten. She had been claimed, not just by a king, but by destiny itself.